Well, well. Look who wandered into the dark again. Welcome, my dear night dwellers, to Wynorrific Wednesdays, where secrets slither in the moonlight and forbidden desires whisper just for you. I'm your guide through the murky twists of fate, and tonight, tonight, we have a story that teeters on the edge of love and lunacy, devotion and damnation. They say the heart wants what it wants, but what happens when it wants something, or someone, it should never have? When yearning curdles into obsession, and fate? Ah, darling, fate always collects its dues. Tonight's tale is Thou Shalt Not Covet, a wickedly tantalizing piece by the ever-brilliant Cassandra O'Sullivan Sachar. It's a dance of passion, ambition, and just a whisper of the otherworldly. And before the night is through, you may find yourself asking, how far would you go to claim what you believe is yours? Bringing this dark delight to life, we have a stellar cast. Olivia Steele, Michelle Kane, Geoff Sturtevant, and N.M. Brown. So, be a dear. Pour yourself something sinful. Let the lights flicker low and lean in close. Some desires should never be spoken aloud. But tonight, we're listening. Now, I bring you Thou Shalt Not Covet.
It hit me by surprise one random Wednesday morning when I was running late to work. I was in love with my roommate's boyfriend. Shit, I muttered. In my haste, my purse swung straight into my travel mug, tumbling it from the kitchen counter, spilling coffee onto the floor, and landing in a spectacular thwack. Lance came running into the kitchen from Sage's room, pulling a t-shirt over his head.
You okay, Lila? I heard... Oh.
I glared up at him from my position, crouching over the stupid mess I had made, feeling like an idiot. Just making myself even later for work.
Let me help.
He was already opening the cabinet and getting paper towels before I could stop him.
Why don't you just go on to work if you're running late? I'll take care of this.
I tried to explain that it was fine, and I needed to make a new coffee anyway, or I wouldn't be able to function. And then Lance was starting the Keurig and sopping up the spill while I looked on helplessly.
I'd offer you some of the hazelnut creamer I keep here, but I know you like it black. Here.
And I was out the door, a fresh coffee in my hand, ready for my day, but with the uncomfortable feeling of warmth inside me for the kindness this nice man, virtually a stranger, but one I saw almost every day, showed to me. And he'd even noticed how I took my coffee. All I could think was, not again. I didn't want to be in love with my roommate's boyfriend, or anyone else for that matter. Having been burned too many times before, the truth was that I hadn't always handled rejection well, to put it mildly. And it wasn't my style to go after a taken man, not after that unpleasant situation back in college. Though kind of weird with all her candle magic and crystals, Sage was nice enough, never sneaking my food or using my body wash or anything like I'd heard people complaining about when it comes to roommates. She always had a smile and a kind word for me, even though we had little in common. Despite her self-proclaimed identity as a witch, she acted super friendly and bubbly, which must have helped her for her job as a cosmetologist. While it wasn't like she ever offered to do my makeup, even though she could have given plain old me a gorgeous makeover, at least she'd procure some free samples for me every now and then. I never set out to hurt her. A bit of an oddball, I didn't always fit in with others, and sometimes made poor choices when I started feeling upset about that. They never pinned what happened back in college on me, but I allowed it to serve as a reminder. How close to disaster things got. How dark. Bailey and Steve never pressed charges, but they never talked to me again either. After I graduated, I figured it was better, safer to stick to myself and just do my own thing. A lone wolf or whatever. I found a job in a medical lab where I rarely had to talk to anyone, which was perfect. I never really minded being alone. It's not like I ever had close friends, and my parents weren't around much when I was growing up, so I was used to it. So with how nice Sage was, it wasn't too surprising that she found herself a good boyfriend. When Lance came on the scene, he was so sweet to her, bringing her flowers or something special, nothing lavish, a cupcake or a book she might like. And there was the way his face lit up whenever he looked at her, not creepy or possessive like some guys, but like he really cared about her. He wasn't bad to look at either, with his chiseled jawline and fit physique. I wanted them to be happy, at least before my own stupid feelings got involved. Thinking back on all the assholes I knew over the years who seemed to hoard the good things in life, I preferred that true love fell on this couple who didn't treat me like crap. They even invited me out with them a few times. I declined, of course, not wanting to feel like a third wheel. Maybe it was the pessimist in me, or maybe I was sick of waiting around for my own happy ending. But a couple months into the relationship, I started feeling a bit jealous. Where was my love story? Why didn't anyone bring me flowers? Combining this emptiness with the time Lance helped me with my coffee, and I wasn't surprised when it hit me. I was in love with him. I wanted him to be my boyfriend, not Sage's. And that's when I realized Sage had to go. I didn't plan for it to go down like it did. It's just how it happened. I'm not a monster. When I decided I wanted Sage out of the picture, I didn't mean that I wanted to kill or even harm her. Nothing like that. I meant more that they needed to break up, and that she should move out so it wouldn't be awkward when Lance started seeing me. I knew Sage was considered more conventionally attractive than me, but I had something she lacked: substance. Sage was better with makeup and fashion, and she could certainly fill out a bra better than I ever could. But she sure as hell couldn't match me in a battle of wits. I figured that out the moment she warned me that we were living in a dog-eat-dog world. Dog eat dog, I corrected. That's the expression, that one dog would eat another to stay on top.
I like doggy-dog better.
She said, giggling.
Lila?
I let it go, despite my curiosity about what she thought the dangers of that world might be. And then there were her poor financial decisions. how she opened credit cards with hefty annual fees for the supposed benefits of earning airline miles on trips she couldn't afford to take. She simply wasn't smart enough for Lance, who always had a comment for me on the book I was reading and would ask me what I thought about topics from politics to cryptocurrency. I couldn't imagine that he had such scintillating discussions with his girlfriend, who hadn't even voted in the last presidential election, believe it or not. I wondered if Sage's parents understood the irony of the name they'd chosen for their superficial daughter. Then again, for all I knew, they'd named her after the smudge sticks she waved all over the apartment. I didn't even know what those were until Sage moved in. All that cleansing the space and letting in the light nonsense she preached. I didn't believe any of it, of course, choosing science over any type of faith. But I knew that she believed. And that gave me everything I needed to execute my plan. One of the many reasons people have historically underestimated me is because of how quiet I trained myself to be. Sometimes people would forget I was even there. I became part of the background, the fly on the wall, or maybe even the actual wallpaper. That's the way I liked it, hiding in plain sight. So when Sage's witchy friends came over the one night and I was in the kitchen making my dinner, she was quick to silence them.
That's just my roommate.
She said to their concerned stares.
She's harmless. Our secrets are safe with her.
I didn't feel particularly welcomed into their circle as the group, all of whom seemed normal enough, dressed not in robes but in work clothes or yoga pants, pulled out their crystals, knives, candles, and whatnot. But they went on with their business, and I made a show of leaving to demonstrate that I wasn't some kind of spy. But the walls were thin in the apartment, and what I didn't see in their circle, I was still able to hear. And that's how I discovered that Sage had attempted to bind Lance to her with a love spell. All I needed to do was to let him find out. Lance was no dummy. Notoriously careless, Sage didn't even think to accuse me of meddling when her spellbook was left open on her dresser to a certain page, along with a lock of his sandy hair she must have clipped off when he was sleeping one night. Granted, I was the one who pulled out the book, but it fell open to that page due to her strange choice of bookmark. She wasn't trying very hard to hide what she'd done. I don't think Lance believed in the spell, but he was still pissed off that she would do that to him, according to the yelling I heard one night. He slammed the door behind him, and that was that. For them, anyway. I pretended to care, playing the part of the sympathetic roommate, even making Sage a cup of the green tea she liked, all while plotting to get her out of the apartment.
I know he liked me before the spell,
she said through snot-filled sobs.
I just wanted to keep him. It was only white magic anyway. Just a simple enhancer. It's not like I tricked him into falling for me.
Making all the appropriate soothing sounds, I kept my thoughts to myself. The truth was, despite her deception to Lance, I felt a little bad. She and her friends seemed like middle schoolers rather than adult women, casting their silly spells and playing their little games for their crushes to like them. Hell, one of the women was wearing scrubs with cartoon dogs on them. These chicks were hardly ominous witches controlling the universe with their powers. That's why I allowed Sage a grace period to get herself back together before the next phase of my plan. Once her eyes were no longer red from crying, once she declared herself over him, that's when I hit her with my gut punch. A morality clause in the lease. When Sage and I opened the official letter, one I had printed off at work. It very clearly laid out that Sage would need to vacate the apartment, or else we were both in danger of eviction, along with losing our deposit due to her blasphemous practices reported by a neighbor.
Is that even legal?
Sage asked me, ever the trusting roommate.
Isn't that discrimination? Wicca is a religion.
They're a private company, I explained. They can do whatever they want. And I'm really sorry, but I can't afford to lose that deposit. I won't make you pay for your half of the rent this month, but I'm afraid you'll have to go. I fashioned my face into a mask of concern and even managed to squeeze out a few tears. Lies, lies, and more lies. There was no such morality clause in our lease, and even if there were, I had no idea if that would be legal. Plus, I absolutely could afford to lose the deposit. What with my new raise after reporting a certain indiscretion by one of my coworkers, and even a half-wit could see the error in my logic. If I couldn't afford to lose the deposit, why did she think I was so willing to let her skimp out on that month's rent? But she bought it, as I knew she would. Sage was out of the apartment less than a week later, my crocodile tears continuing to fall as I made false promises to stay in touch. Finally, after giving him some space to get over Sage, it was time for Phase 3. Make Lance mine. Like his former girlfriend, Lance could be a bit too trusting. Not only did he fail to keep his phone at his side at all times, but he didn't even have a password. Even my 10-year-old niece had one on her phone, and most of her texts to her friends were probably about Taylor Swift. One night prior to the breakup, when Lance was over and the door to Sage's room was closed, I happened to notice his phone lying on the kitchen counter. I pressed the button on the side, wanting to wake it up and see what photo he had as the background. Eagles logo, as it turned out, which was basic and boring, but at least not as bad as a romantic photo of him and Sage. Little did I expect for the home screen to open up, but it did. How could I say no to an all-access pass into Lance's life? Keeping one eye on the bedroom door, I took a peek into everything I could. Work and personal emails, his calendar, texts to friends and family, and social media. I tried his bank account app, but he had facial recognition required for that to open, restoring some of my faith in his intelligence. I would have gone down a massive rabbit hole if I'd had the time, but I knew that door could open any minute, and I sure didn't want to be caught red-handed. Plus, I learned enough, like where he stopped for coffee several times a week, thanks to the receipts sent to his Gmail account. After the breakup, I missed seeing him, of course, and perhaps I drove to the parking lot of Sharon's Sweet Treats a number of times to check for his car and figure out his routine. Maintaining a degree of self-control, though, I refrained from going inside, even when his car was there, since I wanted enough time to pass that he'd feel excited to see me. I was pretty proud of myself that I limited it to that one coffee shop and didn't look for him anywhere else. Not his work or the store where he grocery shopped or anything, even though I considered joining his gym. Then again, it wasn't on the same side of town as where I lived or worked, and not even Lance had the power to get me on a treadmill. And at least there was social media, where I could gaze into his soulful brown eyes whenever I wanted and track most of his movements. Despite being genuine and humble, he enjoyed cataloging his life, and I was glad for it, happy to soak in the rays of his Lance-ness on a daily basis as I mentally followed him on his hikes through the woods and forays into new hobbies. I even bought myself a pair of hiking shoes and tried to improve my cooking skills to ready myself for when we were finally together. Those shoes stayed in the box and my pasta carbonara was mediocre at best. Still, I was trying to improve myself for him. trying to become a better version of myself to deserve him. 3 months. I waited 3 whole months, all the while knowing he could have found someone new, that I might have someone else to get out of the way so he could be mine. But I didn't think he had. Not that his posts ever got into personal stuff like his love life. His Facebook status had been single even when he was dating Sage, and I didn't think he was the kind of guy who would sleep around. He was too good for that. So I bided my time, waiting for the right moment to casually bump into him. I started going inside Sharon's Sweet Treats and ordering myself a coffee and pastry around the hours I thought he might show up, figuring it would seem more natural if I was already inside instead of getting there after him. And then he'd have to come over to me versus the other way around. Part of me felt foolish, taking time off work and wearing t-shirts of bands I knew he liked or thought he would enjoy. Not to mention the books I'd bring with me to read as I waited for him. But I talked myself off the ledge since it was all an investment in my future happiness. I knew I wasn't the typical kind of woman Lance dated. Not just because of Sage, but because of the other former girlfriends I found buried deep within his Facebook profile and in his Instagram photos. Lance seemed to be attracted to girls whose aesthetics and personalities were different shades of quirky. There was an anime-looking girl, one chick who dressed like she was a 1950s housewife, and, of course, Sage the Witch. Looking through these girls' posts, I found little that made them stand out as being worthy of the helpful, intelligent man I knew Lance to be, and their photos of pumpkin spice lattes and filtered sunsets proved them to be pretty basic. As for me, I was always pretty dull when it came to my appearance, wearing only minimal makeup and choosing most of my clothes based on convenience and comfort versus making a statement. But I think few would describe me based on my looks, especially once they got to know me. I was called some things in my time, many of them unflattering, but boring was never one of them. I liked what I liked. Once I made a decision, I stuck with it and was willing to do what was necessary to get it. Or, in this case, him. Finally, I was reading a Sylvia Moreno Garcia novel and eating a blueberry muffin, not even paying attention to the world around me when I heard his voice. A welcome sound in the months of silence.
Lila?
I loved how he said my name. How the vestige of his faint Louisiana accent sneaked out in the long I sound, filled with bayous and crayfish and whatever the heck else they had down there, far from the rushed, clipped voices and horses and buggies of central Pennsylvania. Putting down my book, one I was guessing he wanted to read if he hadn't already, as we shared a love of literary horror, and it was no coincidence I'd brought this one with me. I looked up at the man of my constant thoughts for the past several months. "Oh, hi, Lance," I said, the smile on my face genuine, even if the surprise was manufactured.
Are you in a hurry? Do you mind if I sit?
Considering I'd taken the whole morning off just in case today was the day, I gestured for him to stay. It didn't take long for us to slide into an easy rhythm of conversation. Before I knew it, an hour had passed, and I really did need to get going.
I'm so happy I ran into you here.
Lance said, his eyes meeting mine for a moment, but then looking away.
Do you think you'd want to get together on purpose sometime?
And just like that, we started dating. I had the tendency to build people up in my mind. I'd experienced intense crushes since elementary school, and the object of my affection would never stray far from my thoughts. But the thing was, none of them had ever appreciated me back before. Sure, I'd gone on dates and had some short-term boyfriends, But these were all guys for whom I'd settled. Lance was different. Instead of pining away for him when I woke up every morning, feeling his absence like a hole in my heart, I woke up each morning filled with hope. Even my coworkers made comments about how it was nice to see me looking so happy. And most of them had done little but grunt a hello to me before. And I was happy. Lance was wonderful, just how I'd imagined he would be as a boyfriend. I'd never even been great at feeling at ease and usually carried around a ton of social anxiety, but with Lance at my side, I found myself relaxed and having fun no matter what we did together. Part of me wanted to tell him the truth, how I'd orchestrated the breakup with Sage and lingered around his favorite coffee shop so I could run into him. But I didn't want to risk losing him. After all, he'd broken up with Sage for casting her love spell or whatever, and it was possible he'd be upset about the methods I'd used to ensnare him, even if no magic was involved. Nope, just my own cunning brain. So I said nothing and basked in the glory of the relationship, suggesting about 6 months into it that he move in with me. Normally, I'd have balked at being so forward, but he had mentioned how silly it was for him to spend rent money when he was over at my place all the time anyway. He mostly avoided Sage's old bedroom, which I'd converted into a spacious home office, but he seemed comfortable everywhere else. I'd never been so joyful, and part of me kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to destroy the fragility of our shared lives. And then it did. Lance and I were out at dinner at what had become one of our favorite restaurants when I heard the tinkling laugh to which I had once been so accustomed. Sage. The last time I'd heard that cheerful, frivolous sound, I'd sat alone in our shared living room watching reruns of Gilmore Girls while Sage and Lance cooked dinner and drank wine. I probably should have retreated to my bedroom to avoid the green-eyed monster crouching over me, but I was a glutton for punishment, while also wanting to impinge upon their happiness. I executed the breakup plan the very next night. Afterward, the only sounds I'd heard from my former roommate were sobs and a voice of anguish. But that was nearly a year earlier. Like Lance, she had moved on, it seemed. Lance heard it too. I could tell from the way he cocked his head, like a dog searching for the source of that sinuous sound. If he wanted to pretend he hadn't heard it, or that he hadn't looked, it was too late. We locked eyes. My comments about the film we were discussing died on my lips. Lance must have read my discomfort.
I'm not interested in talking to her,
he said.
Let's not go over to say hello.
He had more reason to avoid Sage than I did. After all, she and I parted on good, if not entirely truthful terms. But they hadn't. We continued eating our dinners, making awkward small talk, the easy camaraderie we normally shared having dwindled faster than the wine in our glasses. In the end, we couldn't escape her. She walked right by our table. My tension eased when she came directly into our sight. At least we were forced to deal with it, whatever it was, head on. The mean, petty part of me couldn't help but notice how bad she looked. Her hair hung lank and greasy on her shoulders, and she seemed almost frail in comparison to the voluptuous figure I recalled. I offered a meek smile. Sage, hi.
Wow. I wasn't expecting to see you. Either of you.
She said, her eyes widening as they raked over Lance.
Hi, Sage.
Lance said, his lips tight as he speared a piece of rotini on his plate.
Well, don't leave me hanging.
Sage's companion, a tall, lean woman with a tangle of curly red hair, stated, her eyes darting back and forth amongst the three of us.
Sage, you want to introduce me to your friends?
Sage let out a bark that may have been a laugh, but was far from the carefree melodic sound of earlier.
Gloria, this is my ex-boyfriend, Lance, and my ex-roommate. Exes, this is Gloria, one of my sisters. Coven sisters, to be clear, since you both are clearly in the know about my lifestyle and clearly disapprove. But I'm not hiding who I am for anyone anymore.
Even in the ambient lighting of the restaurant, Sage's face flamed, and I took in other details about her I hadn't noticed. The blemishes marring her once perfect complexion, the gray strands threading through her hair, even though we were both still in our mid-20s. Even her outfit seemed out of character. Her black dress was stained and worn, her boots scuffed. This was not the same woman who used to spend an entire hour getting ready for work every morning. Indeed, the last year hadn't been kind to my former roommate. It couldn't just be the breakup with Lance, could it? As much as I found her vapid at times, Sage wouldn't let the death of a relationship destroy her, would she? And to think of the part I played in it all. My stomach seemed to flip, and the linguine alfredo threatened to spew from my mouth as bile crept up my throat. Grimacing, I swallowed it back down.
Oh, I see,
Gloria said, her coal-lined eyes narrowing. Her black dress resembled Sage's in style, long with a flared skirt and sleeves, yet it fit her well and appeared glamorous, especially in contrast to the color of her hair.
In that case, fuck you both very much. Sage, let's go.
Without another word, Sage stalked toward the door. But right before she exited, she spun around and glared back at our table. Reeling from the discomfort of the exchange, I wanted to look away, but remained transfixed. I watched as her lips formed words I couldn't read, a stream of them. Her eyes seemed to flash. And then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. Lance and I barely said a word to each other the rest of the night. But I understood the dangers of holding in my feelings, remembering those times my emotions heightened and toppled over into complete despair. So I broke the silence when we were brushing our teeth. You saw her, right? Before she left? She was chanting. I think she might have said some spell or even a curse. It's not like I believed Sage had powers, but I knew better than most how a woman with a grudge could cause trouble.
I don't think she's well, Lila. I feel kind of sick about it. Just in case I had anything to do with it.
Lance murmured back, his reflection pale. Well, she sure didn't look like she appreciated seeing us together, that's for sure. I think maybe we should watch our backs.
I'm sure it's fine. But I agree that she didn't look happy. Let's not go back there again. I think that pasta did a number on my stomach.
It wasn't the pasta. In the next 2 weeks, he could barely keep any food down and quickly dropped 15 pounds. His clothes, when he had the energy to get out of bed and go to work, hung off his body. He thought it was the flu, but his symptoms failed to improve, so he finally agreed to go to the doctor. He needed documentation to miss any more work. And once the doctor admitted him into the hospital, they barely let him leave. Advanced pancreatic cancer. The doctor said they couldn't understand how he'd been walking around like nothing was wrong until the pain started. I watched as he shrank before me, his skull becoming prominent in his face, his muscles withering away. If I didn't have photos from our early days together, I wouldn't have believed that his biceps once bulged out of the sleeves of his t-shirt, or that he used to lift me like a sack of flour and spin me around the room. I hung around in the corners of waiting rooms while he received the treatment the doctors warned us was unlikely to work. He grew thinner and thinner, wasting away to almost nothing. Finally, one sunny November morning, I sat pale and stone-faced, and they lowered the little that remained of my boyfriend's body into the cold, hard earth. His mother, whom I had met mere days earlier when Lance learned he was at the end, had swooped in and arranged everything. She seemed to dismiss me as the girlfriend of the moment rather than someone more permanent, even though we lived together. I couldn't begrudge her grief and tried not to take it personally. The priest, I hadn't even known that Lance was raised Catholic, was reciting some sort of prayer as I fiddled with a string on my black mourner's skirt. That's when I saw it out of the corner of my eye. A flash of red hair across the cemetery. Squinting, I couldn't make out her features, but I recognized the lanky frame. Gloria, Sage's sister. And there was Sage beside her, stouter than when I last saw her. Even from this distance, I could tell she looked better than the last time we met. Healthier. Then again, anyone looked good compared to poor Lance those last months. They walked closer to the small gathering, and that's when I noticed the third figure of the group. One I hadn't seen in years. I recognized her walk first. The way she seemed to put all her weight on the ball of each foot like she was wearing heels, even when she wasn't. The last time I'd seen her was when we left the police station, after the questioning where I denied slipping her the pills. Bailey, my former roommate, right there with my other former roommate. Lance's body lay in the coffin in the space between us. What was Bailey doing here? And was Sage of all people? Panic surged in my chest, drowning my sorrow, and I clenched my hands into fists, my fingernails digging white crescents into my flesh. I needed to leave. Now. Lance's mom didn't blink an eye, and I wondered if she'd met Sage, who crept closer. Walking beside Bailey, I noticed how much they resembled each other. The dark, shiny hair and pale skin. They almost looked like sisters. I rose to my feet, my purse falling on the grass. Lance's mom shot me a glare, but I didn't care. It's not like I'd be sharing a Thanksgiving table with her. Not now that Lance was gone. I stumbled past the rows of chairs, measuring the distance to my car. 10 yards ahead. 5 yards. I sensed them drawing closer and broke into a clumsy run, my kitten heels sinking into the earth. That's when I felt the hands clasp onto my wrists.
Thou shalt not covet,
Bailey hissed into my ear, her breath hot on my skin. And the witches were upon me.
And that was Thou Shalt Not Covet, a tale of longing, of wanting, of taking, and the price that must be paid. And trust me, darlings, that price is always steeper than you think. A round of devilish applause to our phenomenal cast: Olivia Steele, Michelle Kane, Geoff Sturtevant, and N.M. Brown, for breathing light into tonight's temptation. And of course, to Cassandra O'Sullivan Sachar, whose pen drips with the kind of dark magic we adore. If this story sent a shiver down your spine, or left you glancing over your shoulder, then be sure to follow Wynorrific Wednesdays wherever you get your podcasts. We wouldn't want you to miss out on the next tale that slithers in the night, now would we? And if you're feeling generous, leave us a review. It helps us keep the shadows deep and the nightmares delicious. Until next time, my darlings, be careful what you covet. You never know who or what might be coveting you back.